Ever wonder why the smartest person you know seems perpetually unhappy, or why genius and misery so often walk hand in hand? Arthur Schopenhauer, that gloomy 19th century philosopher with the wild hair, had an answer that might hit uncomfortably close to home. Intelligence is a curse disguised as a gift. Stay with me. In the next 10 minutes, I'm going to explain why your intelligence might be the very thing making your life harder than everyone else's, and why Schopenhauer believed that ignorance really might be bliss. Intelligence as a burden. That's the core of what we're diving into today. Not exactly the inspirational message YouTube's algorithm favors, but there's something brutally honest in Schopenhauer's perspective that refuses to be ignored. Schopenhauer wasn't just being dramatic when he claimed that intelligent people suffer more. His argument was methodical, almost clinical. For him, heightened intelligence functions like a magnifying glass, not just for perceiving the world's beauty, but primarily for amplifying its horrors. Think about it this way: the smarter you are, the more you see, the more connections you make, the more you anticipate, the more you remember. Each of these cognitive functions comes with a shadow side. Take pattern recognition. An intelligent mind excels at detecting patterns across seemingly unrelated events. That's brilliant for scientific discovery or creative insight, but it's devastating when applied to human behavior, societal flaws, or existential threats. The intelligent person doesn't just see the single instance of suffering or injustice. They see it as part of a larger, inescapable pattern. Schopenhauer puts it bluntly: the more intelligent a man is, the more he discovers of the human misery. This isn't philosophical posturing, it's an almost mathematical truth. Greater processing power equals greater awareness of reality's harsh dimensions. But there's more to it than just seeing the world's problems more clearly. Intelligent people also suffer from what Schopenhauer called the willfulness of all life. He developed an entire metaphysics around the concept of will, not just human will, but a blind, restless, striving force driving all existence. The more intelligent you are, the more you become aware of how this will manipulates and controls us all, pushing us toward endless desires that can never be permanently satisfied. The average person chases the next promotion, the next relationship, the next purchase without questioning why. The intelligent person sees the hamster wheel for what it is, but still feels compelled to run. That awareness creates a uniquely painful type of cognitive dissonance. This connects to another of Schopenhauer's insights. Intelligent people suffer more because they're cursed with foresight. They don't just live in the present moment. They anticipate future pain, future loss, future regret. They run simulations of what could go wrong, what will inevitably decline, what must someday end. As he wrote, the present is all that really exists. Yet people who think much more than others can hardly help living more in the future. This forward projection creates a state of perpetual anxiety that those living primarily in the present never experience. Here's where it gets particularly uncomfortable. Schopenhauer believed that intelligent people also suffer more in their relationships. Why? Because they see through social facades more easily. They notice the contradictions between what people say and what they do. They detect the subtle signs of indifference or deceit that others might miss. Every man takes the limits of his own field of vision for the limits of the world, Schopenhauer observed. The intelligent person's field of vision is simply larger, which means they see more of other people's limitations, including their moral and intellectual shortcomings. This creates a profound isolation. The more you understand, the fewer people truly understand you. The intelligent person often feels like an alien observer among their own species, connected enough to care deeply about humanity, but detached enough to see its absurdities with painful clarity. But perhaps the cruelest aspect of intelligence is how it sharpens our awareness of our own mortality. Schopenhauer was obsessed with death, not in a morbid way, but as the central problem of philosophy. The intelligent mind grasps not just the fact of death, but its philosophical implications. As he put it, after your death you will be what you were before your birth. The intelligent person doesn't just fear death as a distant event. They contemplate the void, the absolute negation of consciousness. They grasp what most people instinctively avoid thinking about, that their entire existence is a brief flicker between two infinite darknesses. This awareness isn't just psychologically painful. Schopenhauer believed it fundamentally alters how we experience time. The intelligent person feels the weight of temporal existence more acutely. They sense how fleeting each moment is, how quickly life slips away, how everything we build will eventually crumble. So what's the solution? Is ignorance truly bliss? Here's where Schopenhauer gets interesting. Despite his reputation as philosophy's premier pessimist, Schopenhauer didn't conclude that we should lobotomize ourselves into happy stupidity. Instead, he offered three paths toward alleviating the suffering that comes with intelligence. The first is aesthetic contemplation. When we lose ourselves in great art, music, or nature, we temporarily step outside the endless striving of the will. In these moments, we become pure, will-less, painless, timeless subjects of knowledge. This is why intelligent people often seek refuge in aesthetic experiences. They provide brief respites from the burden of consciousness. The second path is compassion. Schopenhauer was heavily influenced by Buddhist and Hindu thought. He believed that recognizing the fundamental unity of all suffering beings could transform our relationship to our own pain. When we realize that the same will animates everything, the boundaries between self and other begin to dissolve. The final and most radical path is asceticism, the denial of the will itself. By renouncing desires and attachments, Schopenhauer believed we could gradually quiet the restless striving that causes suffering. This isn't about self-punishment, but about freeing oneself from the tyranny of wants. These solutions might sound insufficient compared to the magnitude of the problem, and perhaps they are. Schopenhauer never promised complete liberation from suffering, only its temporary suspension or gradual diminishment. So where does this leave us? Are intelligent people simply doomed to greater suffering? I think Schopenhauer's analysis is more nuanced than that. Intelligence magnifies suffering, yes, but it also provides the tools for understanding that suffering and potentially transcending it. The same cognitive powers that make us more aware of life's horrors also allow us to appreciate its beauty more deeply, to connect with others through genuine compassion, and to glimpse, however briefly, what lies beyond the endless cycle of desire and disappointment. Perhaps the real message isn't that intelligence is a curse, but that it's a responsibility, one that requires wisdom to manage. As Schopenhauer himself suggested, the intelligent person must learn to balance awareness with acceptance, insight with compassion, knowledge with equanimity. There's something strangely comforting about Schopenhauer's grim diagnosis. If you've ever felt that your intelligence makes life harder rather than easier, you're not alone. Some of history's greatest minds have felt the same way. And maybe understanding why we suffer is the first step towards suffering less. In a world that relentlessly promotes positive thinking and self-improvement, Schopenhauer offers a different kind of wisdom, the courage to look unflinchingly at reality while finding small moments of peace within it, not through delusion or distraction, but through the very intelligence that heightens our pain. That's Schopenhauer's paradox. The mind that reveals our chains might also contain the key to loosening them, not breaking them entirely, he was too honest to promise that, but learning to carry them with a certain grace. Maybe that's the best we can hope for, and maybe that's enough. So how does Schopenhauer's grim diagnosis apply to our hyper-connected, information-saturated modern world? If intelligence was a burden in the 19th century, it's practically unbearable now. Think about it, we're bombarded with more information in a day than Schopenhauer processed in a month. The intelligent mind doesn't just absorb this data, it connects it, analyzes it, and most painfully, it understands its implications. Climate collapse, democratic backsliding, economic inequality, mass extinction. The 24-hour news cycle makes sure you don't miss a single catastrophe. And if you're intelligent enough to grasp the systems behind these headlines, the complex causal chains, the feedback loops, the historical patterns, you can't simply shrug and say that's politics or it is what it is. You see too much, you know too much. Schopenhauer never had to scroll through Twitter, now X, watching in real time as people reinvent tribalism with hashtags. He never experienced the peculiar agony of seeing the full spectrum of human thought reduced to performative dunks and viral outrage. The intelligent person doesn't just see a stupid take. They see the cultural forces that produced it, spread it, rewarded it. Social media has weaponized what Schopenhauer called the opinion of others, which he considered one of life's great torments. He wrote that the folly of altering and improving opinion of others, especially of the mass of people, has reached such heights precisely because we are not in a position to control it and must therefore suffer from it. Imagine what he'd make of our economy of likes, our marketplace of validation. Then there's modern work. Schopenhauer believed that boredom and pain were the twin poles of human existence. Either we're suffering from unfulfilled desires or we're suffering from having nothing to desire. Today's knowledge economy often manages to combine both torments simultaneously. The intelligent office worker finds themselves trapped in what anthropologist David Graeber called bullshit jobs. Pushing digital papers, optimizing metrics that measure nothing of value, sitting through meetings that could have been emails. The cognitive dissonance is excruciating. Your brain, this evolutionary marvel capable of art, insight, discovery, reduced to crafting the perfect email sign-off or debugging code for an app that makes billionaires richer. Dating apps would have given Schopenhauer a field day. He was notoriously pessimistic about romantic love, seeing it as nature's cruel trick to perpetuate the species. He wrote that one would expect that between human beings only hatred could exist, yet love drives us together for purposes beyond our conscious understanding. Now imagine his reaction to algorithms commodifying this most irrational force, turning potential partners into a carousel of images to be swiped through during commercial breaks. The intelligent person doesn't just experience rejection, they see the marketplace dynamics at play, the commodification of connection, the reduction of human complexity to profile stats. What about leisure? Schopenhauer believed aesthetic contemplation was one of the few escapes from suffering. But our entertainment ecosystem is designed for maximum engagement, not transcendence. Binge-watching isn't the same as losing yourself in art that challenges and transforms. The intelligent person consumes the same content as everyone else, but sees its formulaic nature, its manipulation of emotional triggers, its careful avoidance of anything truly disruptive. Even our attempts at improving mental health often miss Schopenhauer's deeper insights. Modern wellness culture tells us suffering comes from incorrect thinking, cognitive distortions that therapy can correct. But Schopenhauer argued that suffering is woven into the fabric of existence itself. No amount of positive psychology can change the fundamental nature of a consciousness trapped in time, aware of its own mortality, forever striving and rarely satisfied. There's a special irony in how our tech utopians promise to enhance human intelligence through artificial means. Schopenhauer would likely ask, why would you amplify the very faculty that intensifies suffering? Perhaps he'd see our creation of AI as an unconscious attempt to externalize the burden of knowing, to create something that can process the world's horrors without experiencing the pain of awareness. Yet despite all this, Schopenhauer's solutions remain surprisingly relevant. Aesthetic contemplation still works, though we might need to work harder to create the conditions for it. Turn off notifications. Close the laptop. Find art that doesn't just entertain but arrests your consciousness, temporarily suspending the endless striving of the will. His emphasis on compassion feels especially necessary in our polarized discourse. When Schopenhauer recognized that all beings are manifestations of the same underlying will, he was articulating something not unlike what our best neuroscience and psychology now tell us, that the boundaries between self and other are more permeable than we assume, that suffering is universal even when its causes are particular. Even his most radical solution, asceticism, finds modern parallels in minimalism, digital detox, and voluntary simplicity movements. These aren't just lifestyle aesthetics, but attempts to address what Schopenhauer identified centuries ago, that endless acquisition and stimulation don't lead to satisfaction. Perhaps most valuable is Schopenhauer's fundamental honesty. In an age of toxic positivity, where every challenge is reframed as an opportunity and every failure as a lesson, there's something refreshing about a philosophy that acknowledges life's inherent difficulty. Not to wallow in misery, but to clear away illusions that ultimately make suffering worse. The intelligent person in our modern world faces unique challenges Schopenhauer couldn't have anticipated. But his core insight remains true. Heightened awareness comes with heightened pain. The question isn't how to eliminate this connection, but how to bear it with dignity, how to use our intelligence not just to see more clearly, but to live more wisely. Perhaps that's the paradoxical comfort Schopenhauer offers the modern overthinker. You're not crazy for finding life more difficult than those around you seem to. You're not failing at happiness. You're experiencing the natural consequence of perception. The same intelligence that burdens you is also your potential salvation, if directed toward understanding rather than rumination, compassion rather than judgment, acceptance rather than resistance. In our relentless pursuit of technological progress, we've created tools that amplify intelligence without addressing the suffering that accompanies it. Schopenhauer reminds us that the most sophisticated smartphone can't resolve the fundamental problems of existence. Only wisdom can do that, and wisdom begins with the courage to see things as they are. So the next time you find yourself overwhelmed by awareness, when you can't stop connecting dots others don't even see, when you're paralyzed by implications others blithely ignore, when you feel alienated by understanding too much rather than too little, remember Schopenhauer's insights. Your suffering isn't a malfunction, but the natural shadow of your intelligence. And in that recognition, perhaps you'll find, if not happiness exactly, then something more enduring. The quiet dignity of seeing clearly in a world that rewards comfortable blindness. In the end, that clarity itself might be worth the price of pain.